As the tape recorder clicked on, a chilling scream pierced the courtroom air, freezing jurors, family members, and spectators in horror. Their victims' desperate pleas for help, captured on tape, unleashed a collective gasp, tears, and stunned silence. This is the story of the Toolbox Killers. In the late 1970s, a pair of serial killers, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, stalked their prey, leaving a trail of terror and death. Lawrence Bittaker, born in 1947, and Roy Norris, born in 1948, grew up in California. Lawrence Bittaker's childhood was marked by instability and neglect. Born to a teenage mother, he was shuffled between foster homes and relatives. His mother's struggles with addiction and relationships led to a chaotic environment. Bittaker's early years were filled with feelings of abandonment and insecurity. As he grew older, Bittaker became increasingly rebellious, engaging in petty crimes and dropping out of school. He was arrested multiple times for burglary and theft, leading to stints in juvenile detention centers. Within days of his parole from the California Youth Authority, Bittaker was arrested for transporting a stolen vehicle across state lines. In August 1959, Bittaker was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment, to be served in the Oklahoma State Reformatory. He was later transferred to the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri, to serve the remainder of his sentence. In 1960, Bittaker was released from prison and soon reverted to crime. Within months of his release, he had been arrested in Los Angeles for robbery and, in May 1961, was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. While incarcerated for this robbery, he was characterized by a psychiatrist as being highly manipulative. The psychiatrist also described Bittaker as having considerable concealed hostility. Bittaker was released on parole in 1963 after completing 2 years of his sentence. In October 1964, he was again imprisoned for parole violation. In 1966, Bittaker underwent further examinations by 2 independent psychiatrists, both of whom classified him as a borderline psychopath. A highly manipulative individual unable to acknowledge the consequences of his actions. Bittaker explained to one of them that his criminal activities gave him a feeling of self-importance, although he insisted circumstantial matters pertaining to his environment and upbringing decreased his ability to resist committing crimes. Bittaker was prescribed antipsychotic medication. A year later, he was again released into society. A month after his parole in July 1967, Bittaker was again arrested and convicted of theft and of leaving the scene of an accident. He was sentenced to 5 years but was released in April 1970. In March 1971, Bittaker was again arrested for burglary. Due to repeated parole violations, he was sentenced to serve between 6 months and 15 years imprisonment in October 1971. 3 years later, Bittaker was again released from prison. In 1974, Bittaker was arrested for assault with attempt to commit murder, after he stabbed a young supermarket employee who had accused him of stealing. The supermarket employee had observed Bittaker stealing a steak and had followed Bittaker outside and into the store's parking lot, where he asked Bittaker whether he had forgotten to pay. Bittaker responded by stabbing his pursuer in the chest, narrowly missing his heart. He attempted to flee but was quickly restrained by 2 other supermarket employees. The employee, Gary Louie, survived the stabbing, and Bittaker was convicted of the lesser charge of assault with a deadly weapon and sent to California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo. Now let's talk about his partner in crime, Roy Norris. Roy Norris's childhood also was marred by trauma and abuse. His father, a violent alcoholic, physically and emotionally abused Norris and his mother. The family's dynamics were marked by fear, intimidation, and neglect. Norris's struggles with anger and aggression began early, leading to expulsion from school and a series of violent outbursts. In November 1969, Norris was arrested for his first known sexual offenses. He was charged with both rape and assault with attempt to commit rape. In the latter incident, he had attempted to force his way into the car of a lone woman. 3 months later, in February 1970, Norris attempted to deceive a lone woman into allowing him to enter her home. When the woman refused, he attempted to break into her house. The woman phoned the police, who arrested Norris before he had the opportunity to cause the woman any harm. Less than 3 months after this offense, Norris was diagnosed by military psychologists with schizoid personality disorder. He was given an administrative discharge from the Navy under terms labeled as psychological problems. In May 1970, Norris, on bail for his latest offense, attacked a female student whom he had been stalking on the grounds of the San Diego State University campus. Norris repeatedly struck her on the back of the head with a rock until she slumped to her knees before he repeatedly beat her head against the sidewalk as he knelt upon her lower back. Shortly thereafter, Norris was charged with assault with a deadly weapon. He was committed to 5 years imprisonment at Atascadero State Hospital, where he was classified as a mentally disordered sex offender. Norris was released from the Atascadero State Hospital in 1975, with 5 years probation, having been declared by doctors as an individual who was of no further danger to others. Just 3 months after his release, Norris approached a 27-year-old woman walking home from a restaurant in Redondo Beach and offered her a ride on his motorcycle. When she declined, Norris parked his motorcycle and grabbed the woman's scarf, twisting it around her neck, before informing her he intended to rape her and dragging her into nearby bushes. Fearing for her life, the woman did not resist the rape. Although the rape was reported to police, they were initially unable to find the perpetrator. However, 1 month later, the victim observed Norris' motorcycle and noted the license number, which she immediately gave to police. Norris was arrested for the rape. 1 year later, he was tried and convicted for this offense and sent to California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo. Bittaker and Norris's paths crossed in prison. The two men were assigned to the same prison yard, where they began to observe each other from afar. Bittaker, with his charming smile and quick wit, seemed to effortlessly navigate the prison's social hierarchy, earning the respect of his peers. Norris, on the other hand, kept to himself, his piercing gaze and rugged demeanor intimidating to those around him. Despite their vastly different personalities, the two men shared a common thread: a deep-seated disdain for authority and a desire for control. Bittaker, a self-proclaimed thrill-seeker, had a history of manipulating those around him to get what he wanted. Norris, haunted by a traumatic childhood, harbored a deep-seated anger towards women, whom he blamed for his troubles. One fateful day, while working in the prison's laundry facility, Bittaker struck up a conversation with Norris. They discovered a shared interest in photography, with Bittaker boasting about his own darkroom skills. Norris, intrigued by Bittaker's confidence and charm, began to open up about his own passion for photography. As they talked, Bittaker sensed an opportunity to manipulate Norris, exploiting his vulnerabilities to further his own agenda. Over the next few weeks, the two men continued to converse, exchanging stories and ideas. They shared their fantasies of violence, control, and domination, particularly towards women. They discussed and refined their twisted ideas, fueling each other's desires and encouraging increasingly violent and sadistic tendencies. Bittaker shared stories of his past crimes, including burglaries and thefts, which impressed Norris. Norris also discussed his own violent past, including his rape conviction. Both men fantasized about escaping prison and living a life free from authority. They dreamed of traveling, committing crimes, and evading capture. Bittaker taught Norris techniques for manipulating others, including women, to achieve their desires. Norris shared his own experiences controlling and dominating women. Their conversations became increasingly graphic and sadistic, with discussions of torture, rape, and murder. They encouraged and validated each other's violent impulses. Bittaker was the first to get released from prison, while Norris was released 3 months after. After their release in 1978, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris reunited, eager to put their twisted fantasies into action. Both men put money together and bought a 1977 GMC cargo van, specifically for the purpose of committing crimes. The van was a nondescript, gray cargo van with a sliding side door and a rear door that opened to reveal a cavernous interior. The van's interior was also equipped with a makeshift bed, where Bittaker and Norris would rape and assault their victims. The van had no side or rear windows and a big door on the passenger side through which the victims could be snatched. They nicknamed it the Murder Mac, and spent a few months doing trial runs, simply cruising along the Pacific Coast Highway and occasionally stopping at beaches to talk to girls and take their pictures. In June, they abducted their first victim, 16-year-old Cindy Schaefer, whom they forced into her truck, duct-taped her mouth, and bound her ankles and wrists. After raping, torturing, and killing her at a fire trail in a nearby mountain, they dumped her body in a canyon. The following month, they abducted 18-year-old Andrea Hall, took turns raping her, taunted her by encouraging her to scream, and then killed her. On September 3rd, they abducted 2 girls, 15-year-old Jackie Gilliam and 13-year-old Leah Lamp, and held them captive for 2 days, raping them and recording their captivity the entire them. Then, they murdered both. They then abducted Shirley Sanders on September 30th and raped her, but she managed to escape. She was able to report the assault, but couldn't identify her attackers or remember the car's license plate number, and the matter wasn't pursued any further. On October 30th, they abducted and murdered their last victim, Shirley Lynette Bedford, deciding to dump her body on a lawn in Hermosa Beach instead of in the wilderness. Unlike their previous victims, she was raped and tortured while the car was being driven around instead of when it was parked at the duo's usual killing site. They were referred to as the toolbox killers because the variety of tools and instruments they used to torture and mutilate their victims are tools often stored in a toolbox. In October, Norris bragged about his and Bittaker's murders to Jimmy Dalton, a friend of theirs from prison, who initially thought the stories were lies. However, when Ledford's body was discovered, he reported Norris to his lawyer, who passed the information on to the Los Angeles Police Department. 2 police detectives began staking out Norris and arrested him for marijuana possession and parole violation when he was spotted dealing it on the street shortly before Thanksgiving that year. Bittaker was also arrested for abducting and raping Shirley Sanders. After a long interrogation, Norris confessed to being involved in the murders, but insisted that he was mainly an accomplice and had been high on drugs during the murders, beginning to pin the murders on Bittaker. He was allowed to plea bargain, enabling him to place all of the blame on Bittaker. Norris also helped investigators find the bodies of Jackie Gilliam and Leah Lamp. Both men were charged on several counts of kidnapping, rape, robbery, deviant sexual assault, criminal conspiracy, and murder, each blaming the other.
Did you at any time ever use an ice pick?
No, sir.
You struck Miss Lamp with a sledgehammer. Do you recall the sledgehammer which was introduced?
Yes, sir, I recall it.
Was that true?
No, sir.
When the audio recordings they made of their murders turned up, Norris was revealed to have been an active participant. The recording was a chilling and disturbing capture of their victims' screams and pleas for help while being tortured and assaulted by the duo. The reaction in the courtroom was one of shock, horror, and emotional distress. Many people in the courtroom, including jurors, family members of the victims, and even court officials, were visibly shaken and disturbed by the recording. Some were seen covering their faces, while others appeared to be on the verge of tears. The recording was so graphic and disturbing that it reportedly caused some people to become nauseous, while some others had to storm out of the courtroom.
I've heard screams before. I thought I'd be able to sit and listen, but I've never heard anything like that in my life.
I just couldn't believe it. I have a daughter, and I just could see her, and I couldn't take it.
You've heard it, obviously, several times before, and it still seems to affect you, obviously, quite deeply.
Ultimately, likely due to his assistance in the investigation, Norris was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 45 years. Norris became eligible for parole in 2009, only to be denied. He was denied parole again in 2019. Norris died of natural cause in prison on February 24, 2020. On the other hand, Bittaker was sentenced to death and also died of natural cause while awaiting execution in 2019.
If you find this video enlightening, kindly give it a thumbs up and subscribe.